Oi, Budge!
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 This episode's about relationships.
Yes.
We're calling it nudge, nudge, wink, wink, the behavioural science of relationships.
It's just a fascinating and subtle change, but it can make a massive difference. And what's weird is the kind of closer you are to somebody, the more likely you are to be negative.
So if you really want to hurt somebody, then you kick them when they bring you good news.
Ask about them and what they're saying. Don't make it about you.
All those years of expensive therapy, mate, I think we just covered it in about 15 minutes. I should have asked you about 10 years ago. Welcome to Budge, how to fudge being human. Welcome back to Budge, our podcast on behavioural science, nudge theory, and a bit of psychology to help you become better at being human. As always, I'm joined by Dr. Darren Coppin, writer, speaker, lover, and of course inspiration behind the song Donald, Where's Your Trousers?
I just come down through the 𝗖𝗛𝗘𝗥𝗡𝗅. Brilliant. Yes, hello, Paul Miles. Thank you for that. Managing Director of the Busy Group, one of Australia's largest education, training and employment organisations. And he was the bloke behind Neil Tennant in the Pet Shop Boys. Look it up on YouTube. That's him standing behind him.
I can't try to keep that quiet. Mate, what percentage of relationships fail, do you think? Because it was always supposed to be 1 in 3 marriages ending in divorce was always the old classic thing that was when I was a kid. What do you reckon? What percentage of relationships fail now?
50%?
Boom! You've been looking at my notes.
Is it?
Yeah, it is 50%. Yeah.
Going by my own
What
record.
percentage of relationships fail for people under the age of 30?
Have already failed.
Or will fail?
What's your definition of relationship? Is it a dalliance?
So the 50% was the marriage one. The other one was just people in relationships of any sort.
Oh God, 70%?
Yeah, 90% of relationships under the age
90?
of 30. 90.
What did you say, yeah, when it was totally
I should
wrong?
have said no.
You're so nice.
20%, give or take. Interestingly, there was a research done into relationships and how many succeed and fail, and a guy sort of interviewed, a researcher was interviewing people at 2 months. What percentage of those had failed a year later that had been together for 2 months?
After 2 months, 50% again?
Yeah, nearly. I won't say yeah, I'll say nah. 60%. And of course, you're far more likely to break up if you're unmarried as opposed to married. And speaking as a person who's never been married. And interestingly, whether you're a same-sex or heterosexual relationship, once you get to 20 years, there's only a 1% chance you're going to break up.
After 20 years together?
After 20 years, I suppose that's institutionalisation though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you're in that 1%, I guess the point is, mate, is that the failure rate for relationships is going through the roof, and there's some of this stuff that could be tracked again to our evolution of behavioural science, particularly around how long we're living. I guess is that formerly, of course, people got to married like my parents at the age of 18 and 19, and then they stayed together forever, and of course we died so much younger than we do now. So relationships were almost, because of as well the institution, the community expectations. And now in this modern world with Tinder, with social media, just the way we live our lives, relationships fail far more than they used to. So I guess the question is, are we supposed to be in relationships humans in this day and age?
Well,
are we designed for
I'm
it?
just about to start reading a book by a bloke called Christopher Ryan about the evolutionary psychology of relationships, but I haven't finished reading it yet.
Oh, so you don't know the We should probably not. We'll just stop now, should we?
Why do you say we live much longer now?
Mortality.
Yeah, but the reason for that figure going up is that child mortality's gone down. So it's been pretty static around 70 years and 10 for several millennia.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you know? I actually did not know that. I actually thought that aside from obviously the health the health and medicine around child mortality, I actually just thought that we did live longer. And certainly that's a common myth. We live longer, therefore we're not dying so quickly after retirement. Yeah.
So a lot of again, indigenous societies, which are a good marker for how we used to live. Living to your late 60s, 70s is pretty par for the course once you get through childhood, once you get past 10 or 11 years old. But what was funny was I was
so this notion that relationships kind of post-retirement didn't have much left in them, whereas nowadays they do, so that's not actually true.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No. Yes. But I mean, what we are doing, there is evidence that we're extending life. but it's a life of pain and agony with illness. So we're prolonging death rather than extending life. And I think the last few years' figures for the United States is the average age or mortality age has gone down slightly. So it's stopped increasing. And that's because we've kind of plateaued at child mortality.
And are all now completely obese. I feel like we've gone off on a tangent already.
Yeah, sorry.
This episode's about relationships.
Yes.
We're calling it nudge, nudge, wink, wink, the behavioural science of relationships. And you've actually come up with some takeaways at the end as well as to how to help your relationship. It's such a big, deep subject. This is one that we could do multiple podcasts on. So this is kind of the introduction. I don't know if I'm the right person to talk about this. My relationship history means I'm either going to be really useful at this one or really bad, and I can't quite work out which yet. But mate, are we
bad?
Humans? Are we humans supposed to be in relationships? And are we supposed to be in relationships with one person for a long time?
Well, we're supposed to be in relationships. We could potentially be the most social, relationship-driven species on the planet, with the sclera, the whites of our eyes, have an evolutionary disadvantage.
So where?
Well, say there's a bit of food.
Yep.
And you can see me looking where it is. Like you do this often, and then your fork comes in.
Yeah, all the time.
My steak.
All the time.
But you can imagine as a primate and evolving, that's not actually yet useful. Being able to see where I'm looking, or say there's a predator about to attack, and I look over there, you can see where I'm looking at the same time as me. Whereas it's in my advantage to get out the way, and you didn't know where the predator was coming from, and you become the prey. So the whites of our eyes have an evolutionary disadvantage in general for survival, but a massive advantage in terms of communicating to each other, knowing what we're thinking, and enabling us to be empathetic and altruistic as a species. So we've also, the larynx was possibly the greatest wrong development mutation we had that allowed us to be the only hominid species to still survive, our ability to communicate. Our eyebrows kind of serve two purposes. One, we're a brilliant endurance hunter and sweater, you especially, so it keeps the sweat out of our eyes, but also it's a massive signal when we're communicating.
Works
as
for
well.
the rock.
So we're absolutely driven to communicate and be in relationships with each other to an enormous extent.
So literally some of these evolutionary things point to us as humans that we should be in relationships as opposed to other sort of species.
Yes, and with each other in general as a group.
As opposed to other species.
But I'm
Welsh.
The relationships of individuals being together, a monogamous relationship, I presume you're mostly focused on, is debatable.
Polygamy? It seems to be getting very popular, which I think you're off to Utah soon.
Yeah.
Just saying. Coincidences everywhere.
But no, but regardless of whether it's evolutionarily practical or bred into us, culturally for the last several hundred years, it's been more appropriate to be in a one-to-one relationship, and that's where we're at. And you can predict if people are going to break up. Most of us want to be in a relationship, a stable relationship. Enables us to focus on other things and thrive in other areas. Yeah. So regardless of whether we had it throughout all of our history and we stick together like 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗨𝗧.
Do they stick together?
Yeah, they have one partner. It's always one of the saddest things on earth, driving along seeing one that's roadkill and the other one just put at a curb staring at it.
I've got a new reason to be sad from that one.
Yeah,
I didn't
great.
know this.
I'm glad I cheered you up.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
But yeah, and you can predict if people are likely to break up with remarkable accuracy.
Really? Why is that?
Well, it's really a bloke called John Gottman. It's been decades his work, but he remains really the authority if you're going to look into this. And by looking out for 4 key ways that people interact, I think.
I'm just looking through your notes really quickly here. 93.6% accuracy he could predict if you're going to divorce.
Allegedly, yes.
That's incredible.
And he'd converse with the partners individually and together, and he could tell if these 4 things came up repeatedly,
Yeah.
in their communication and interaction with each other, he could tell with that remarkable accuracy whether they're going to break up or not.
So obviously the next question is, what are these 4 things?
Wearing black t-shirts is a disaster. But
Pretending to be a CEO.
But if you
Having a podcast.
if you seek pretending to be a doctor, if you seek criticism,
Following Liverpool. Having children. Anyway, I'll stop.
but if you look to insert into your conversation, interaction, criticism at any opportunity, that's one of the 4. If you keep doing that,
So criticising your partner.
yes. Contempt was number 2.
Oh, that was
Did
clever.
you like
That was
that?
clever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, don't do that to me.
All right. Ah, yeah.
Defensive. We shouldn't do this. What's the last one?
Stonewalling. That's awkward silence on a podcast.
Yeah.
Stonewalling.
Oh, so criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. Those are the key predictors of a failed relationship with 93.6% accuracy.
Not necessarily a failed relationship, but
Or
one
that's
that is
going
going
to
to
fail,
fail.
going to fail.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you can think about
So
this.
just just explain exactly what those are to be done. I know we joke, but criticism, literally just being critical of your partner.
Yeah, and seeking any opportunity to score points.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not thinking about my past relationships at all right
You
now.
are totally. Contempt is
Not thinking about my. Yeah.
And contempt and disdain is horrible because it's really a lack of, from the pit of your stomach, a lack of respect for the other person. And the best relationships are where you really value what that other person does and what they contribute, and it reciprocates.
I see. There's a lot of research on this one in particular that literally once you start to have contempt or lack of respect for your partner, then that's when they start to fail. And the converse course is if you have respect and actually admire your partner, then the chance of it succeeding would go through the roof.
Yeah. So doing these podcasts is a bloody disaster.
I know.
Encouraging contempt and criticism from our partners. And defensiveness, of course, not addressing it, but constantly being defensive, protecting yourself and rebuffing accusations or critiques.
And I assume a lot of that would also then come from if the fact you've got criticism and contempt in a relationship, you naturally move to defensiveness anyway.
Yes, yeah. And then stonewalling is you've just given up. You don't care what the other person's saying or thinking, you just don't engage.
So stonewalling because you're just worn out, or stonewalling as a tactic because you're over the relationship?
Both. And that, I think when we were discussing
and by stonewall,
this
we almost mean just silent treatment, don't we?
Yeah, literally in your lounge, building a stone wall halfway through the lounge.
Yeah. It's fascinating as someone who is, periods of being single and sort of, you go on dates and all that sort of stuff. It's fascinating when you hear about other people's relationships, how common this sort of stuff is.
Yeah, and it also doesn't mean you can get into this downward spiral of point scoring with them, and it doesn't mean to say they're not to be rescued and you can't save them if you want to. And one of the key things, because you can't help it when you're in an argument, when you accuse other people of doing stuff, you did this, you did that, and when you say you and accuse somebody of something, they can't help, even if they kind of agree with you, but be defensive and start fighting back about it. Well, you did this and you did. So it becomes this tit for tat.
You did this 17 years ago.
but
you threw my underpants on. Yeah.
Yes.
So what should you say instead of you? Give me an example, mate. So you say, give me an example of what you should do.
You embarrassed me. You made me feel ridiculous when we were out and in front of your friends.
So is this going to be like the thing with a child where instead of saying you, you're supposed to say, I feel embarrassed or I feel this?
Yeah. Why do you say?
With a child, when you raise a child, instead of saying you're such a naughty, whatever, you say your behaviour right now. It's that change of language. Yeah,
that's a slight tangent, or it's a combination of things, because that's labelling, and it's something I really struggle with. You've been so naughty, and then I realise after the stinging slap from the wife, but I realise that I shouldn't label, because if you call somebody naughty or messy, they're more likely to be naughty or messy in future.
It almost becomes part of their personality, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly, and that can work with adult relationships. But if you, instead of saying you really embarrassed me, and simply change it to I felt embarrassed.
Yeah.
Then the human's natural affinity is an inclination is to actually say, can I? I want to help you. you felt embarrassed, not I made you feel embarrassed, but you felt embarrassed in that situation. How can we rectify
So you bring it back
that?
to being the best scenario, which is the two of you working on the situation together.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of it being you, and
like,
if you
how
say,
do we,
I felt, and then the person comes to you and holds your hand rather than slaps it, it's just a fascinating and subtle change, but it can make a massive difference in relationships.
The other thing that I've come across a lot, so I have done a fair bit of work on the whole, self and all that around relationships. Is this notion of interactions, right? So, Jordan Peterson, and I know, again, whenever I quote Jordan Peterson, I quote the fact that I don't agree with very much that he says. But I do sort of note that one of the things he says is that we need, for relationships to work, a certain percentage of really positive interactions to every negative interactions. And if you get to a point where you have too many of these negative interactions to lower and lower positive, that you effectively are on a downhill spiral heading towards that 93%, being part of that. So he always quotes the ratio of about 5 positive to every negative is what's needed to make a relationship successful. Is this what you've discovered? Because I know you were quoting some different numbers to me when we were discussing this issue.
And it is exactly that. Where he would have got that is from the work of Gottman and Barb Fredrickson, and some of the supporting statistician data that she used has been since dissed, if you like. But the fact is that she has a positivity ratio survey on her website. Tens of thousands of people have completed.
So straight away there's flaws around the actual research.
Well, no, this is the robustness of it, is that when people answer that, from the States, they can work out from the IP address, more than 80% of people score less than 3 positive to 1 negative interactions in their life each day.
What are these interactions? Are things like, oh, hey, I love you, or hey, how's your day?
Well, I suppose it's feeling there are 10 positive emotions, I guess, like joy and fascination or engagement and happiness and humour and laughter, these sorts of things. But obviously there are other negative ones like shame or guilt or embarrassment. And people are generally, 80% of people are feeling less than 3 to 1 of the positive to negative ones. Now, the reason why the 3 to 1 one is interesting is that some of these studies suggest that that's the tipping point between a life of flourishing and a life that might be impacted by potentially mental health issues, or you're not feeling so great.
And so that then translates also to relationships as well.
Yeah, and it's massive, because if you go home and you've just got home, how was your day? Crap. Oh, bloody hell, is that what we got for dinner? Crikey, I thought you were going to tidy this up and do the washing up. And then you think, my God, I've just said 4 negative things. So to just reach the tipping point of not having a disastrous relationship, I need to say triple that. So I've got to say 12 good things now. Yeah. Bloody hell, how do I do that? Oh, your hair looks lovely today, right one. Dinner was...
I feel like you've had to practice this a lot.
yeah, really a lot. Because it is a massive self-conscious effort, with our negativity generally, to go into this positive thing. And what that slightly dissed research found was that the best performing business units have, amongst their colleagues, a 5.6 to 1 ratio of positive to negative things that they say to each other, which is probably where Jordan Peterson got his number from.
We're talking predominantly about romantic relationships. Do those interactions...
We always do.
Oh, we do. It's our thing. Do those go beyond romantic relationships, that 5 to 1, or is that more broad?
Absolutely, any interaction that you're having, and that's why I brought up the business relationships. And I thought initially, well, if you're doing well as a business unit, then you will say positive things. Oh, it's going great. But what apparently this research did, where they had people from the uni students measuring everything everyone said, and ticking whether it was a positive, negative or neutral comment, it predicted the performance of those business units rather than measuring it post their performance. Okay. So the more positive your interactions, and I guess it's something a bit called the heliotropic effect. You gravitate towards positive things and things that are doing well and strong, and it garners sort of better performance.
This, like I said, this is a massive subject and one that I've had so much therapy on. But there's so much we can talk around this. But one of the key things, of course, to our relationships is communication, right? When we talk about the 5 to 1, Is there a way that we talk to each other in terms of the style of how we converse with each other that actually impacts on the success of these relationships, so we don't become part of Dr. Gottman's active, predictability sort of downside?
Yeah, I mean there are 4 different ways that you can converse with each other and interact. And what's weird is the kind of closer you are to somebody, the more likely you are to be negative. It seems
you feel more comfortable with it.
I guess so, yeah. And it's the voice inside your head expanding and what have you. So you can be actively destructive. So someone comes in with good news, like I've got a job, you can be actively destructive and say, well, what am I going to do all day? And you only lose it.
I don't mean to bring this up again, but Jordan Peterson, this is something he talks about, and it's something that Christy and I have talked about, actually, not in relation to each other, but in relation to other people we may or may not have used to know. And it's this notion that what Jordan Peterson talks about is that if you really want to hurt someone, you hurt them when you bring them good news. So
really?
Yeah. So look at what I've done today. I'm trying to think. I've done so well in my assignment. I got 80% in my assignment. Why didn't you get 90%?
Yeah.
You could have done better then, couldn't you? So if you really want to hurt somebody, then you kick them when they bring you good news.
Yeah.
And it's again, not much I agree with this guy on, but it's something that I've watched and thought, wow, that really is how you hurt somebody. That's how you hurt a relationship.
Take the wind out of their sails.
Yeah, almost intentionally.
But again, that's kind of that contempt as well, and that criticism of those four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse.
So is that part you started talking about conversation styles? Is that an actively destructive conversation? Is that
and then you can be passively destructive. When you just ignore what somebody's just said. I've just passed my assignment. I went out today, caught a fish, and it's like that just deflates you. It's like a stomach punch when people converse with you like that. You can be passively constructive. I did a great assignment. Oh, that's nice.
80%. Well done.
Yeah. And then there's one really common thing, and the people that can harness this or do it intuitively are so liked. You can see it in organisations wherever I've worked, is if you say something like, I've just done this assignment and I've got a great score. Did you? What was it about? How did you get it?
It's almost a skill, isn't it? And again, not just in romantic relationships. I think if you have a genuine romantic relationship, that active constructive sort of conversation happens naturally. It's like, oh, you got 80%, that's so good, that's awesome. Whereas I think in more of a leadership sort of thing, it's actually being really active and constructive about that feedback. And
there's only one thing you do in it, and it's ask a question about what they just said.
Oh, really? So that's the next stage. So, well done, that's awesome.
You don't even have to praise. You can just say, how? What did you write about? That sort of thing. And because if you go and listen to a couple of old friends down a pub or on a bus having a chat, I know you just ride around on trams in the Gold Coast, pretending you've got friends, listening to people
with a long trench coat.
But if you listen to people chatting to each other, very often they'll just go blah 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 holiday or whatever, and the other person goes, oh yeah, blah 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 blah, and they relate it to themselves.
Yeah, my holiday.
And it's kind of they're talking at each other rather than with each other. And you can't help but a human relate what you've just heard to yourself. You start thinking about that, then you bring yourself back to the conversation, or you go yeah, which actually means shut up, not necessarily I agree with you, because I want to say something about me. Whereas if you go, oh, you went there, did you? And you resist being able to or saying about
there's
your
nothing worse,
experience.
is there? When you tell someone something and they go, and then they give you their half an hour version of what they did, which was either one bit better.
Yeah, and they take over, they hijack your conversation. And we all do it, you especially.
Oh, all the time.
What, you just did?
Well, let me just tell you about a time that I did that. But isn't there a part, though, where if you get it right, that if you can demonstrate your story, you can relate it to demonstrate you're actively listening to what they're saying? Or is it more a case you're better off to actually just ask about what they're saying, to demonstrate you're actively listening?
Yeah, ask about them and what they're saying. Don't make it about you. But it's really hard. And actually sometimes, that is what a conversation is. You're relating, because what you're doing is aligning yourself with them in, I had a similar experience, but it's when you go over the top and hijack it. But I
feel like all those years of expensive therapy, mate, I think we've just covered it in about 15 minutes. I should have asked you about 10 years ago.
Now, there
I'm
is
kidding,
one
I'm
other
kidding.
tip as well for getting people to like you in relationships and conversations. And that's something called mirroring, which I thought was the cheesiest interpersonal technique I'd ever heard of.
Yeah.
But actually, we're mirroring each other in the way we're communicating. But
It works though.
it does. It's incredible, and
Yeah.
you think it's so obvious when you do it.
We do a lot of it naturally though.
consciously.
When you have a good relationship with somebody, you actually do take on lots of their behaviours, you take on lots of their little quirks. You actually do that, don't you, anyway?
And that's why it works, is because when you've known someone for years, you talk at the same pace, you lean in, you lean back, you copy their gesticulations, you do it unconsciously because you've known them for years and you're engaged and aligned with them. Now, if you do it with somebody you've just met in an interview or in a bar
Or a date.
wherever, a date, yes, then they think, I don't know why, I just feel like I've known this person for years. And it's because you're doing the mirroring that people that have known them for years also do.
Yeah, okay.
So again, it's a subconscious technique.
So I say it is
to get you
subconscious.
liked.
So people would potentially, if they knew about these techniques, they use it intentionally.
Yes.
But also, if you have a genuine connection with somebody, you end up copying each other's mannerisms and movements and the speed of speech.
Yeah,
Whatever
and it's
that
not
phrase is.
manipulative. It's you making a conscious human effort to engage and connect with someone. And it's actually good, you know. So remembering to ask questions, mirroring is massive. And you can really see the difference with people you're communicating with.
Mate, like I said at the start, this is a massive subject. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, the behavioural science of relationships. I think we'll probably come back to this on some very specific things. And of course, if anyone's watching, listening, they can comment and send us some ideas through what was also one of the Facebook groups that we're going to set up on Facebook. Sorry, one of the social media groups we're going to set up on either Facebook and or LinkedIn. So you can comment there. There's a whole range of things about relationships that we could talk about and the behavioural science of them. But for now, mate, the 3 takeaways from this conversation: behavioural science and relationships.
Yeah, well, the key tip I try, or the 3 key tips I try and remember is 1, change the you accusations to I issues. You know, I don't say you made me feel this, I say I felt this. It totally changes the dynamic of your relationship. Aim to exceed or at least meet that 3-to-1 positive to negative comment or interaction.
3-to-1, not 5-to-1.
Well, 5-to-1 is absolutely smashing it and excelling it. 3-to-1 is the tipping point, so try and aim for more than 3-to-1 and try and remember to ask questions, behave actively, constructively in your conversations.
And stop yourself doing that whole negative feedback, like go constructive and go active constructive. Thank you, as always. You can find us where, Darren?
All over. What was that one you said before that I was massive on in that other podcast?
Truth Social.
Yeah, and MySpace.
Do you know what that one is? You know what that one is, don't you?
I have
Truth
no
Social.
idea what
That's
Truth
the Donald
Social
Trump
is.
one that's failing, that he set up after he got banned from all the
But
others.
it's up to us to resurrect.
I know. So I love it. Go on there and talk about all the things you love, like, you know, anything progressive, gay marriage. Go on there and talk about gay marriage. They love that stuff on there. So, mate, we are available, of course. You can follow us on all your finest social media and podcast places: Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Facebook, and we are also on TikTok. If you like what we're talking about, we'd love to hear your comments on all this stuff and how it relates to you. Likes, shares, comments, please. Thanks for watching, and look forward to the next Budge.